continuing with our quest after understanding what true religion is at a time when religion is completely misunderstood. Today, we look at another aspect of true religion. I hope you remember the various facets we have considered briefly in the four foregoing assembly sessions. May I take it as done? I hope you remember the things shared with you. Otherwise, it's a waste of time. Today, our theme is the true religion highlights universal kinship. Kinship is a state of relatedness and belonging to each other. Kinship is the alternative to alienation and aloneness. The world in which we live today is riddled with alienation and aloneness. People are suffering from depression, boredom, and aloneness. These are the diseases or epidemics of our times. And surely there must be some reason for it. And it's our duty to try and understand issues in perspective. Now let me begin by making a reference to an article written by a Jewish philosopher, Martin Buber. He was very popular some 50 years ago, 60 years ago. Now, of course, nobody talks about Martin Buber. In that piece, Martin Buber says, and it's worth remembering, I read it only once, and that was perhaps 25 years ago, and it appealed to me and touched my whole being so much that I still remember it very vividly. He says the French Revolution gave us three universal values. What are they? Liberty, equality, fraternity. Three values. Liberty, equality, fraternity. These are core values recognized as such by every society, every civilization, every people group, every constitution in every age. The most fundamental of all values. And these three are also stated, for your information, in the preamble to the Indian Constitution, which of course adds one more value with which it begins. Does anyone know what that value is? Justice, that's it. So the preamble reads justice, liberty, equality, fraternity. French Revolution said liberty, equality, fraternity. Okay, is that clear? So, commenting on this, Martin Buber says the following. He says, liberty traveled westwards and reached North America and got degraded as unlimited personal freedom and license, resulting in a culture of debauchery. Okay? Equality traveled eastwards, found its home in Eastern Europe, including Russia and that region, and created a faceless collectivity of humanity marked by oppression in the name of equality. all individuality, all uniqueness, all freedom of expression was crushed. And a faceless mass of people was created. So liberty went west, equality went east. Then he goes on to say, but there was not a single taker for fraternity. No one wanted fraternity. And then he goes on to explain that fraternity means kinship, and kinship is the quintessential spiritual element in the humankind. And remember these things. Kinship is the essential spiritual element in the human species that no one wanted. Kinship found no home. Kinship remains homeless. You understand? Now, all of us have been told from the time we entered schools that man, in the generic sense, man is a social animal. What does that mean? It means that my life is incomplete without you. It means that I cannot live like an island. It means that I am not complete in myself. It means that my welfare will be affected one way or another by your lack of it. It means that my freedom is incomplete without your freedom. It means that I cannot be happy if I make you miserable. It means that we have a shared destiny. That's what kinship means. And therefore, anyone who is schooled in the rudiments of kinship will know that all the superficial labels stuck on human beings and people groups are meaningless, are arbitrary, are unspiritual ascriptions or labels inflicted on them by people with vested interests. And this vision was very, very central to the Indian spiritual vision, which is today known as Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which means the whole world as one family. And that is actually one of the best statements on human kinship. Family is the most irreducible element of kinship. So the seers of this country, this subcontinent, in the centuries gone by, millennia gone by, had the spiritual freedom to say that the whole world is one family. What has happened to that vision? Today we are so fragmented, so divided on various considerations and labels that we have made a mockery of our spiritual heritage. Now I want to take you back to this story that you have read. Here is a man who is traveling from one city to another, from Jerusalem to Jericho. We do not know his name. We do not know which religion he practices. We do not know which language he spoke. We do not know from which family he came. We do not know what education he had, whether he is a Stephanian or a Hinduite. We know nothing about him. We know one thing about him, which is that he is a human being. That's what we know about him. We know one thing about him, which is that he is a human being. That's great. It is great to be a human being. Unfortunately, many people don't realize it. Thank God, at least we don't look like animals. We may behave like animals. But we don't look like animals, and we are so created as to behave differently from animals. We have a destiny far more glorious, far greater than the destiny of animals. So here is a man, here is a human being. For God's sake, have the education to see and recognize a human being. A Zen master once asked his students a question, a very simple question. The question is, how do you know that the night is gone and morning has come? What is the question? How do you know that the night is gone and morning has come? What is the answer? So one of his disciples answered, well, when I look at an animal, I know that it is not a cow but a buffalo. Morning is come. The master said, no, that's not it. Another person said, when I look at a tree and know that it is a mango tree and not anything else, I know that morning is come. And likewise, many other students came up with answers. The master said, no, I'm sorry, none of these. And finally, the master was compelled to give the answer himself. And he said, when you walk on the road, and another person comes along, and you can recognize in him a brother and not a stranger, the night is gone. That is when morning comes. When you see another human being and recognize in him a brother or a sister, and not an enemy, not a stranger, the night is gone. And this is called kinship, my friends. And this is exactly what we have lost. And all the problems of the modern times, including terrorism, including the huge insecurity that bedevils life today, originate in this one problem, the fact that we have willfully rejected this divine gift of kinship. And the impoverishment of life that stares us in the face today is because of it. Now you read in the newspapers, for example, that somebody gets hurt on the road, street accident, lies bleeding by the roadside. Nobody would look at that person. I have had that experience. In 1986, I was involved in a road accident near Chanakyapuri. I was very badly hurt. I lay in that condition for an hour and a half before the police jeep came to pick me up. Nobody would stop and lend you a hand of help. Why? Because there is no sense of kinship. A stranger, how does it matter to me that he bleeds and dies? On the other hand, if your brother, if your sister is going to put, the little sister or brother is going to put a finger into that, the socket on the wall, you would run, you'd scream, right? You would do that. If someone you love is misrepresented, vilified, you will protest, because love is the source of kinship. Love is the heart of kinship. So the function of true religion is to promote this spirit of kinship. So here was a man who was wounded, and he needed help. He would die for want of help. And there comes a priest, and like most of us, he turns the other way and walks away. Then comes a Levite, another religious functionary, he does likewise. Then comes a Samaritan. Now understand this, that the Jews treated the Samaritans as untouchables. There was untouchability everywhere. Not only in India. Actually, even though untouchability is abolished, we still practice untouchability. As the Stephanians in yonder days practiced untouchability, we say, with the Hinduites, looked down upon, have nothing to do with it. In 2008, after becoming principal of the college, the first thing I did was, knowing all this, I just walked into the office of the principal of Hindu College. I am not exaggerating. He looked up, he saw me, and he thought I was a ghost. And then he got up and he said, in the entire history of Hindu College, no principal from St. Stephen's College has ever visited Hindu College. That's the state in which we live. Isn't that heartbreaking? A distance of less than 150 meters, we have created the Great Wall of China, separating two institutions which are pursuing the same goal. That's our mentality. And within our own college, there are people who will not talk to each other, untouchability. There are people who will not come anywhere near each other, touchability. There is, of course, mental untouchability. No matter what you say to a person, that person will not understand because he or she doesn't want his or her mind to come into contact with your mind. This is mental untouchability. There are all forms of untouchability. We are practicing untouchability. Why? Because we think it's a great achievement to reject the foundational principle of kinship. Who is free to practice kinship today? If education does not liberate you from your mental ghettos, your prejudices, your biases, if education does not set you free, and as Tagore says in the hymn in the Gitanjali, where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the dreary desert sand of dead habit, where the mind is not divided into all kinds of ghettos, into that heaven of freedom, my Father, let my country awake. Now, all of us have heard the expression that education results in enlightenment. You've heard of this? What's the goal of education? It is enlightenment. Now, we don't realize that light is a symbol also of kinship. Why? How is light a symbol of kinship? Because light does not discriminate between the high and the low, the high caste and the low caste, the high class and the low class, between this college and that college, between man and woman, between man and the rest of creation. Light does not discriminate. Light does not favor anyone. If the richest man in the world stands, and I, one of the poorest human beings in the world, and I stand beside him, and there is a source of light, the light will greet both of us equally. There will be no difference. And that is why light is a universal symbol. So, true religion is the empowerment to live the freedom, the enrichment of kinship. End of the day, we all belong together. You remember the great speech by Martin Luther King? I have a great dream. I have a great dream. And what is a dream? I dream of the day when the children of the whites and the children of the blacks play together. I have a dream. All of human dreams pertain to the blessings of kinship, and all of human sorrows and the giant agony of the world, the burden and the misery of life, all of these pertain to our rejecting kinship as a foundation of life. When you examine the mythologies of the world as well as religious scriptures, you find that in one form or another, every spiritual tradition emphasizes the fact that the human species has a common origin. Now, the kinship that we experience in our family is because of the immediate common origin of that small group. One father, one mother. Your parents. Okay? The kinship that the siblings experience and the kinship that children experience with their parents, all because of that one origin, the common origin. That we can understand at the micro level. Family is a micro unit. But when it comes to the macro unit called the human species, the same thing is true. And that has been the insight of all spiritual traditions. For example, in the Judaic and the Christian tradition, it is written that God created Adam and Eve. And the whole of human species originated from that common source. So there is a logic to this kinship. And this kinship is not an accident. This kinship is actually the bedrock of our humanity. And therefore, if you reject this kinship, your humanity will get distorted and you will suffer aberrations of various kinds. I wish I had the eloquence to convey to you and convince you of the importance of this theme and the seriousness of this theme. Now, I said a short while ago that education is enlightenment and light is a rejection of the anti-kinship attitude. I want to say something more about it. Enlightenment cannot be separated from liberation. To be enlightened is to be free from all these small considerations, the pettiness that usually binds us to our small little spots. An enlightened person has a broader and ever-broadening vision. An enlightened person becomes a global citizen. An enlightened person lives within Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. His home is the whole world. Now, it's very interesting that in a globalizing world, or now it's a globalized world, this principle of kinship has not been taken up by anyone. I wonder how honest we can be in propagating a global order and say that today we all live in the global village without accepting kinship as the shaping principle of this universal or global order. The mentality of the old world has not changed one bit. The mentality that's divided into small ghettos and fragments. The mentality that thrived on account of dividing people and playing one against the other. That has not been modified one bit. But this myth of a universal or global village has been propagated, and all of us have accepted it uncritically because we have got into the habit of deriving all our wisdom from the white man. We must learn to think for ourselves. This is a lie. There is no global order. There is no global village. We're living in the old order. There are 1,000 walls. We are all fragmented. We are being played upon. We are today not free to love one another. The enmity that chokes our public space, the hatred that bristles in the hearts and minds of men and women. You talk about the global village? I have participated in international conferences by hundreds, not dozens. When we sit together as members of various nations, I experience this. That's why I'm telling you. It's my experience. When it comes to the delegates from certain countries, you can't even talk. Your heart longs to reach out and touch, to embrace them, but it's not possible. The divisions run so deep. Within the country, the same thing. Within the college, the same thing. Isn't it a mockery of the very meaning of the word human? So a man will travel from Jerusalem to Jericho. He will be attacked. He will be wounded. He will be left bleeding. Many people are left bleeding. Sometimes you see the blood, sometimes you don't. And when you don't have eyes to see the blood, people commit suicide. Let's rise for prayer.